I've not seen that before, to be quite honest with you. I'm wondering whether there's a frame difference. There's some problem there. So there's a bit of delay between the animations, and it's basically because by default in Marvelous Designer it's 33 frames per second, or should I say 30 frames per second, whereas by default in Cinema 4D it's 24 frames per second, and this is going to basically create a delay between the two frame rates on the model. So what I've done is I've gone and found on the internet this, and it's saying here that there's a step setting inside Marvelous Designer, and it's set to this, which is equaling basically 30 frames per second, and it reckons that a setting of this equals 24 frames per second. So I've just rerun this simulation in Marvelous Designer with those settings to see whether we've actually got a synchronicity between the model and the clothing. Hopefully it will be the case, otherwise we've got some problems to resolve. It's nearly the end of bringing in the MDD file. We'll just play that back and hopefully, yeah, we've got some syncing problems there, you see that? Some major synchronicity problems there. Go to project settings, 24 frames per second. This will tell me whether that is the issue, because they should both be moving at the same time. Let's just see when it should be no lag.
It seems like there is a thing
so that
specific for X1.
no, so between the high-res version and the low-res version there is no lag. So 24 frames per second, MDD export. Need to keep these files separately because it's very confusing. So we're looking for the man MDD. Man high res MDD. We need to start cleaning up some of these files because it's getting a little bit confusing. So man high res MDD. I'm just going to change that. 24 frames per second. Overwrite that. Go into Marvelous Designer. This time step seems to be changing. It seems to be just changing. As soon as I go back, it's changing back again. So this time what I've done is I made sure that I got everything set to 24 frames per second, and this is basically in the project settings, 24 frames per second. And just in case it made a difference in here, I've changed this frame rate to 24 frames per second. And in Marvelous Designer I deleted the old MDD in here, which was actually it might have not been processed properly, so I redone the MDD, brought it in. You can see the name of that is 24 frames per second, and I made sure that before I ran the simulation that I used this figure 0.041666. That's supposed to equate to 24 frames per second. Now you notice if you go to simulation and you go back again, it resets it back to where it was, so that's not too helpful. If I was to, I've not even got it in there anymore in my cache, so if I go back, hopefully I can find that setting again. That setting there, I'm hoping that even if I can save it, that it won't lose it when I go between there. You can see it resets it again. So anyway, when I've put it to there, made sure it didn't change, I ran the simulation, and then I went back into Cinema 4D, imported the MDD file, and now when I play it back you can see that it's actually in sync. And then it should start moving in a second. The only problem I can see with this now is that there is some intersection going on. I'm not sure why this is happening. Just on a couple of frames here and there, and I don't believe that intersection was actually happening in the simulation, but I would have to check it. Let's have a look. We're okay here. No, actually that's okay. So it looks like we've achieved what we've set out to achieve here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this animation. The high-res version is in here as well. I'm going to rename this clothes. I'm just going to put this naming convention in here so we know what frames per second setting is. I'm just going to save this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over back into ZBrush. This is our low-res mesh, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of sculpting on this, and just to make sure that no, everything should be fine. I was going to make sure and bring the mesh back in again, but I'm pretty sure that this is the mesh that we done all the rigging on. Yeah, that should be fine. So the next stage is to store a morph target. And in fact, you know, I'm going to make sure, double make sure here. What I'm making sure of is that the mesh is exactly the same as the mesh that is in Cinema 4D. And it worked. Oh no, can't do that. That's the high-res version. Nothing in there. There's nothing in there. It looks like there it is. Just to make sure, that's all. Morph target, store morph target, subdivide a few times.